Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Unity Radiant Light. This is Sunday, March 3rd, 2024, and I'm beginning a 3-week series on Ascension symptoms. And this week, we're going to talk about Ascension symptoms self. I'm Reverend Cherie Ruffo, and I look forward to sharing this series with you. As we travel through Lent, I wanted to talk about Ascension. Maybe we'll say, okay, what does that have to do with Lent? But this is the journey that Jesus came here to teach us. He talked about the new earth. He talked about the 1,000 years of peace. He gave us little hints along the way. And what he did was he brought us a blueprint for a new living. Now, ascension can happen to anyone at any time during a lifetime, if we take the steps. But what's happening now on our planet is a mass ascension. The planet itself is ascending, and we're going to talk about what that means. So to be able to really cover this, fully for the 3 weeks, we're going to talk about what's happening today with ourselves in ascension. And then next week, we're going to talk about what happens within our own communities when ascension is occurring. And then the third week, we're going to talk about mass consciousness and how ascension is impacting that. I think there will be some very interesting conversations, and I look forward to being able to share these thoughts with you and getting your viewpoints back too. So have you ever felt like you're transforming into something different? That things are both puzzling and profound at the same time? Has anyone here felt like things are moving faster, like time speeding up? I remember hearing my parents talk about that when I was a child. But this is even different. Like they say now that even everything seems so much faster. Well, these are normal symptoms and normal signs that ascension's occurring, that something different is happening. And these are all normal things for ascension, like what we're going through on this planet. And people will say to me, well, when you talk about ascension, what do you mean? And ascension is synonymous with the word transformation. So, and we know especially in our studies as Unity Truth students, or whatever spiritual studies you have, that we go through transformations in our life. And we're looking, and as we use our spiritual tools, we're looking to grow. We're looking to transform into a better life, into a higher dimension, what we're going to talk about. And this is all very much part of this human journey that we're having. Because as I always say, and you guys know, is we're fully human and fully divine at the same time. It means that we have a piece of divinity within us. And with that, almost everybody has this call to a higher calling, to live a better life, to seek something. And if you're here, I believe that you're going through that process right now because you're attracted to something like this. So we say, well, what about these dimensions? What does this mean? Well, we were born into, most of us, not people in the last, children in the last 10 years, were born into the third dimension, which is a much denser dimension. It's a place where we have linear time. As we move forward into the other dimensions, and they're called the dimensions of light, linear time fades. We're not bound by the time. We came into this, we have a full body, a heavier body. Things are denser on the earth. We have a strong gravity for that. And it seems like, and sometimes, when things seem really hard, we're born into an environment where there's, a lot of competition. There can be darkness as well as light because there's a balance. And in the third dimension, it's more like this classroom. And sometimes it feels like we're taking the hardest exams in the world. Not to say that it's a bad place to be, but in third dimension, we see a lot more drama. We see a lot more competition where people may steal from others. Also, we're here to feel that other side of that, to fully live in love, to fully live in, the beauty of what's here in our nature. So these are the things. So as hard as the third dimension can be, we do know that it is also the next step. So the fourth dimension used to be thought of, and in fact, Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore did a paper on fourth dimension, which is a place where people were when they weren't here on this planet. Now that's changed, and most of the planet, most people on the planet are in the fourth dimension, which is still not a dimension of light where we step into a whole new life, but it's kind of the tunnel, the way to get to that. And in the fourth dimension, we're starting to question things. I mean, I think everybody can agree on the planet. There's a lot of fighting going on right now, right? And it's because we're questioning things that we didn't maybe recognize before, because in the third dimension, we were more asleep. And then the fifth dimension is a dimension of light. Now, people will laugh at us because we are linear beings. And so we like to number things. So we'll say third, fourth, and fifth dimension. But what this really means is that we are multidimensional creatures. Because we have this divinity, with this divinity inside of us, and we're seeking to grow, that we can be in more than just one dimension. And we don't have to be limited to any of those dimensions. We can be multidimensional, which sometimes when I start to think about that and look at the definitions, I start to suck my thumb, because it just is a little bit much for where I am. So, because it means it has so many meanings, but I do enjoy opening up to it, learning more about it. So as our frequency rises, what's happening inside of us, because we're going to talk about self today, is our cells are actually speeding up, and things appear to move faster and faster. Because what happens in this process is that we need to remove the dense emotions from our life. Frequencies from the third dimension. There's a lot of things that are happening and that have happened in the third dimension, that as we awaken and we begin to notice more things in the world, and we begin to see parts of greater realities, that we're going to have to release. We can't take it with us. And this is all part of the transformational process. So as we start at this beginning with the agreement that we are in ascension right now, something big is happening and transforming this planet, and that we know that that part of it cannot change, because once we stepped onto this path, and we really stepped on it fully around 1989, and we can talk about that, it's a whole other talk. We really stepped on it then, that everything seems to be accelerating. Think about the things, that we did and knew in 1989, and think about what started happening in the 1990s and around that 80s time. Course of Miracles came out. If you haven't studied it, look it up. It's amazing. The Celestine Prophecies, the 3 books that came out that talked about this time. I remember reading it back then and wondering, wow, what does this mean? And now I went back a couple of years ago and I looked at it like, this is really prophetic. So when we start hearing about the word ascension, and we stop and we think, what does that mean for my being, for me? What does that mean for Cherie? What does that mean for you? And it also means physical change for us. And we're going to talk about that a lot today, because we're going to talk about 12 symptoms of ascension. And we know that this is our personal evolution, transformation, ascension. This is personal evolution for us. It's the change in our consciousness, and it happens on all levels, not just one. So if you're in ascension, it's happening on your physical level in your body, mental level, your spiritual level, and it could happen at different times. Things happen differently, or it can happen all at once, which can seem like a lot sometimes. I think people will agree. In our classes here at Unity Radiant Light, we talk a lot about this process that's happening, and we share it together. And we'll talk about this next week, about having that community that can help support you through that. Some people refer to ascension as losing touch with reality. But what really happens is, yes, we may go through symptoms. We have times like that, but we're gaining a deeper sense and understanding of ourselves, of why, who and what we are, and why we're here. And it happens across our bodies, our communities, and our universe. Many of us have been in this awakening for a long time. But know that your spiritual awakening probably looks different from somebody else. one of the things that became very clear very early in this process is that this is really personal when you're going through it. We can share ideas with each other, we can support each other through it. But it's not something, and I see this as people sometimes saying, well, sign up for this course and I will get you Ascension. You can't do that. It's one thing we can't pay off. We can only go through Ascension by walking through the steps ourselves. And it's not something we can fake. This is who and what we are. This is where we resonate. We may have experiences, in our bodies where we feel certain aches at times. We're going to talk about that. We might feel ungrounded, and we're going to do some breathing techniques and meditation today that can help with any of these symptoms. What's happening is the veil is getting thinner for us. And we're also maybe seeing things that we haven't seen before. We might see things like me having to reboot this too during this talk because of the vibration of which we're talking at, which is perfectly fine and normal. So what's really happening? And I know I'm aging myself here. I'm revealing my age here is what a better way to put this. But when we're in Ascension, is what's really happening is we really are getting a new operating system. And what do we know about that? We use the phrase a lot of times, like trying to put new wine in old wineskins. What happens? Oftentimes it's not, they burst, they can't hold it because they're old wineskins. So as we're getting this new operating system, we need to put it into something new. And as I was thinking about this and thinking about the talk this week, I thought about how we've changed and how the operating systems that we know have shifted. And I remember in the 90s when I thought I was hot stuff and I was carrying my pager because I was very important, right? So the pagers helped us feel important. They knew it gave us also an opportunity for people to reach out for us, find us. Does anyone remember that first cell phone in the middle? I needed a whole purse for that because it was so big. And the distance, I think, was, yes. Yeah, I think the distance was maybe just a few miles, right? that we could speak on it. And then I couldn't remember whether the next one, that Nokia, that first one, or the flip phones were the same. And if you're still using any of these, there's no judgment here, but we can't talk about upgrades. And then I remember that I had the years of my BlackBerry, and those were super, I felt really good about those too. And now, of course, in my 50s, I don't know that I could touch those little buttons the same or even read the message, read what I'm putting in them. And then we had the evolution to the smartphone, and that was around 2006. And then that's when all of a sudden the need for other cameras started to fade. All the operating systems that we knew, even the things that we're doing from our computer, we were starting to use, we were using, dial-up. Remember dial-up? Where I remember I had AOL and I would come in my office and I would turn on the AOL and then I'd go get a cup of coffee. I'd brew it and come back, and maybe I was in at that point. And now everything happens instantaneous. So if you can imagine trying to use these old tools to work on any of the operating systems today, you couldn't do it. And that's similar to what's happening in our own bodies and our own minds and basically in everything around us. There's a new operating system and we have to learn how to function in it. So I thought that was a great illustration. And there's so many others because things have changed so much so quickly, especially in the last 30 years. So the first Ascension symptom is you feel like you are under pressure. Does anyone feel like that? The air seems denser, maybe pressing in a little bit more on you. It's one of the first signs that you may have. You may have already had it. You may be in it now, or it may be coming. But this feels like we're under pressure, both mentally and physically, because everything's changing at once and it seems out of control. Kind of like as we're going through getting new phones and getting new operating systems externally to us, that's all happening inside of us too. And because what's happening is the very essence of us, our inner being, as we enter this process, is transforming. And the good news is it's not just about this happening now. As we attune to this frequency, our body will feel like it's not under the stress it's under, and we will move into a higher frequency. So if you also, another good way to think about it is, if you have a guitar or piano, if you play a musical instrument and you get them tuned, what happens when you get them tuned? You're tuning them to the frequency that they need to be at, right? That's exactly what's happening in our bodies. We're going to have a clearer pitch. We're understanding more at this level. And we have to create a new balance in this. It doesn't just happen overnight. For some people, it may. I'm not going to argue that with anyone. But for most of us, this happens over a period of time. We're trying to find new balance in our bodies with this new energy. The challenging part of this symptom is that when we start to attune to these new frequencies, it also means that we have to let go of old patterns, beliefs, and actions. And what happens is that it's kind of like when we turn the earth in the spring, is that we're bringing them to the surface with this. So we may see these things rise up again. We may see it in our own society, which we're going to talk more about. But it has to come to the surface because it can't remain hidden. In order to ascend, we have to heal it. And we have to release what no longer serves us, which is a lot of these frequencies. Kind of like that spring cleaning that I'm about to do in my house. I'm going to be shaking loose things that might have been sitting there for a while. Time to not only shake them loose, but to clean them, to remove them. This process is only temporary. As with each of these, if it feels like it's a lot, you can also set the intention to slow it down, but also know that this is only temporary as you attune to these new frequencies. And as you know, think of it like growing pains. We might feel that when we went through growth spurts as a child. The most important thing for you to do is to have patience and self-compassion. Don't be hard on yourself through this. Not to try to rush through anything. Just be very present, because as we're moving out of linear time, the only time really is now, to be present to it. So know that every minute that you might feel uncomfortable is a step towards this new beginning. Kind of like my company's name is Chrysalis, because it's in the cocoon. We're transforming, moving to transformation of the environment with it, because it's an environmental company. As we're talking about self this week, we're in that cocoon in this stage, and new ideas are vibrating. We need that nourishment. We need that compassion to be able to move through the next phases of it. The second symptom on Ascension is feeling disoriented and out of place. How many of us have felt like that? Like, what am I doing here? It's almost like walking into a room that you walk into every day and feeling lost. The sense of disorientation is common. Some people relate it to vertigo. They might feel a little bit more severe. And also know that as I talk about these symptoms, if you're having them, it is important to seek out medical advice too. You don't want to just assume this is an Ascension symptom, but make sure you're doing okay with your body. So the sense of disorientation is a very common symptom of Ascension. It's almost like being a traveler in between two worlds. As we've been grounded and came into the third dimension, and we're stepping into this next dimension, it can be a disorienting process. And because we're letting go of the 3D reality, and we're moving towards these unknown realms. And we know that when we start to move, when we have change, it can be pretty uncomfortable because we don't know what's coming. We can exist in several realities, not just the third dimension. So we may have many different feelings throughout this. But we'll be talking more about that. And don't worry, you're not lost. You don't have to fall into confusion, because this is a normal part of this process. It's a sign that you're transforming. All of this is celebrations of transformation to this higher consciousness. This is what the Fillmores, the co-founders of Unity, founded Unity on, was when Jesus was talking about this new way to live, this transformation. This is it. Now we're getting really weird, aren't we? So all we have to do is know that if we're not familiar with this new dimension, and we're letting go of the things that really we don't need in our life anymore, that it's okay. It's our opportunity to step into these new realms of awareness and existence. You can feel unsure. That's okay. That's just part of this process. This is all new stuff for us because nobody can walk you through Ascension, because everybody's looks differently, because we have different needs. It's a new process for all of us. But you're discovering a new way of being in this world. And this way has opportunities and peace and joy like we've never experienced before. This next symptom, as I know for especially people that attend Unity Radiant Light on a regular basis, not only I've been dealing with it for more than a decade, but many of you have too, is we wake up between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. Sound familiar? I'm doing better with this one now, but I still have my times where I wake up at that. And it's more than a sleep disturbance. This is an Ascension symptom, and it's a really clear one that happens because it's a time that's associated with significant brain and body activity. Things are happening in our body. Science shows that we're at the end of the rapid eye movement, the deep sleep part of our sleep at this time. Everybody's time might be a little bit different because we're all a little bit different. But when we start processing, our emotional processing, memory consolidation, we're starting to deal with the consciousness. What does this have to do with Ascension, right? It's when the conscious and unconscious come together to start dealing with some of the memories that we might have. We know that in the unconscious is conscious mind is 10%. So that's where 10% of our local long-term memories, logical thinking, critical thinking. But sitting in our subconscious mind is 90%. And those things that are sitting there have to be rethought. Some things have to be let go. And it's important for us that our mind and spirit are engaged during this time so we can process these emotions. A lot of profound work happens during these hours. And it's where we can, we talk about waking up with thoughts, situations that happened a long time ago. And I'll talk about this more when we talk about the last symptom too, dreams. But this is where these things are coming to the surface because we have to deal with them and we can solve them. So I used to get up and go on the computer and social media and see who else was up. And a lot of you guys were up then and we were chatting. I don't do that anymore. I use this time for meditation to be able to process a little bit more, a little bit deeper. Sometimes I got a Kindle, so sometimes I can have my spiritual readings. Whatever it is, I try to make it a time that I use so this process can happen. Because some of these things that are going to arise have been buried for a long time. A lot of the spiritual traditions call it cleansing and releasing hours. So as you've experienced these different spiritual traditions, you may hear about it. We know it's also the time when the indigenous talk about the veil being the thinnest between this realm and the realm that we go to when we're not here. The good news is this is really deep transformative work that's happening. Our mind is dealing with the things that it may not have been able to, that we just kind of put to sleep in the subconscious. And that's also temporary. So in the beginning, almost every night I was awake at those times. That's not so much anymore. Now when I'm going through and I call it shifting, when I'm shifting because I can feel my shifts now, that's generally when I'll wake up and I'll be dealing with some things that I thought I might have dealt with or had been buried in for so deeply that it's time to deal with it. The fourth symptom is engaging. You can't engage in activities that don't resonate with you anymore. Are there certain things that you used to do all the time or people used to hang out with all the time and you just don't feel like doing that anymore? This is a profound shift in our interests. It's also another Ascension symptom. Because the things, as we start to release those things that no longer serve us, we're replacing it with things that do serve us now, and that may look very differently from what we used to do. I know from in my own household, there's certain, like, we don't like to watch, violence on TV as, like some of the things we might used to. Hallmark it happens in our house much more frequently. So we're changing our old routines because they're not going to interest us anymore. We've changed too much. And that's a good thing. So we're realigning our eternal being at this point. We feel that realignment process happening. And as it happens, there may be other things we want to do. And, like I used to get up and go on social media when I'd wake up. Now I would just want to go either into meditation or really just study or experience the readings of people who have not traveled this path or might have some good ideas. These are like wearing clothes that no longer fit, like the wineskins that we talked about earlier. You might feel guilty about this especially because some people, and this is where we'll start seeing the shedding process of people that might be really dramatic or they live in drama and they want you to live in the drama with us. That may not attract you anymore. You may not want to be around that, but you don't need to feel guilty about it. It's just a process of us shedding and also bringing more spirituality into our lives. Learn to trust yourself with this and let go. If you feel the need that you have to let go of something, it's time to do that. The fifth ascension symptom is experiencing anxiety, panic, and depression. Like, uh-oh, what does that mean? And this is a significant sign of ascension. It's the time when our ego feels like it's losing its grip. Realizes, hey, I'm not really in control here anymore. Something's happening. So those emotions will come to the surface while the ego is trying to hang on. This can be really disorienting for a person. And as we ascend and as our vibration goes up, we might go through this. This might not just happen once. Any of these symptoms may happen at different times during this process. It's our body, mind, and consciousness is going through massive change. We're shedding our old behaviors. A lot of us are changing. I mean, when I went through this, I went through a divorce. That was very painful, but was also letting go of old habits and things. And we both moved on. I'm very happy. It may feel like you have nowhere to turn, but this couldn't be further from the truth. If you feel like that, know that you are on the path to ascension. This is good. And remember, we're going to do some breathing in meditation today to breathe through it, just to breathe through. Don't panic and with how you're feeling. The things that you needed to operate in a third dimension aren't necessary anymore. Even when feelings can be unsettling for us, they're not permanent. So always remember that if you're having this feeling right now, it's not going to be permanent. This is just what you're passing through. I felt like when I going through this process, and I've gone through it several times because as I reach different stages, I start to feel like this again. To me, it almost feels like waking up after a really long sleep. I wake up and new ideas are there. Things are let go. My life changes a lot. One of the things I remembered, it's not like I didn't care because I always worked in not-for-profit and I worked as a social worker and then I worked as an executive director. So I cared very much about what was happening in the world. But going through this process, all of a sudden, front and center was this realization that 30,000 people die a day from starvation in our world. And that's not okay. Looking at all our resources and everything else. So certain things are rising up that I guess I can't unsee anymore. Not that I would want to, but they just were, as I was more asleep and walking through my days, I didn't notice them as much as I notice them now. So the news, I can see the drama with it. A lot of it's set to try to get us to be either angry, upset, feel like the world's ending, whatever it is. We can recognize that for what it is when we get to this, we're in this phase. And I think about it, politics, they feel really crazy right now, right? But really, weren't they always? Maybe I was just asleep to it more because a lot of these ideas haven't changed. I'm just noticing them now. So this is going to get easier because as we move through this, we're going to feel that sense of love, safety, and move into that unity consciousness, which is the fifth dimension. Even if this journey is challenging, it's leading to a place of peace and profound connection that we've never been in before. So once again, be patient and compassionate with others, but especially yourself. The sixth one is feeling out of our bodies. Has anyone ever felt like you were out of your body? This is a major sign of ascension, where you feel like you're floating out of your body and that someone else is speaking through you sometimes. It's like, what is this? This is an overlay of that consciousness shifting. This is what we feel when we feel that overlay of it. It's actually a normal reaction because we're feeling that control shift from our ego consciousness to a higher consciousness. And what the ego does when it feels like it's out of control, sometimes will make us feel like we're distancing ourselves from a situation. Body goes through the physical changes. If we don't feel the full effects the body's going through, we won't be able to navigate this process. So we have to ground ourselves. This is really important. We do our meditations and we feel ourselves grounded into the earth. When it's warm, like today's going to be 61 degrees out here in New England, and go sit outside with my feet in the earth and feel that connection. And so part of this feeling like we're out of our body is, you could call it a spiritual anesthesia. So what we need to do is allow it to pass and then go into recalibration. Because we are feeling this overlay. What is that overlay? It's when we plant in our subconscious mind, hoping it becomes a reality. We're feeling more of the conscious mind being aware of what's in our subconscious. That's when our superconscious, our great I am, spirit, whatever you call it, that's us, is more present in our everyday lives. So it's really important to not try to change or cripple the operating system. I love this. Before the system upgrades, we were going nowhere. Now we're going nowhere fast. Sure. When we're like having ascension symptoms like that, it can feel like it. And I love the ice pick in the computer because she says, I'm not sure that's compatible with your operating system. So we don't have to destroy what's happening. We just have to breathe through it. We have to relax through it. The things that we needed in the third dimension are no longer necessary. So these feelings can be unsettling. They can be scary at times, but they're necessary. And they also are helping us to move into this higher state of being. Sometimes the outer world feels like it's out of sync with where we are, right? That's just the process. That's the process we're going through. We need to ground into our bodies. I know that if something's really uncomfortable, it's going to pass. This too shall pass. Because what happens with ascension number 7, symptom number 7, is we have heightened sensitivities to our surroundings. So we're feeling this now. We're starting to work with this new energy. And it's a key sign of ascension. Our senses become amplified. You know, I felt this recently a lot because I'm an empath and my empathic abilities have expanded greatly, which means that when I walk into a room full of people, I'm feeling the emotions there a lot more than I used to. Or sometimes when someone's talking to me, but they're feeling really emotional, sometimes it can almost feel like they're screaming at me. So for a while, crowds were more overwhelming, noises were more jarring. And what I had to do was just take a breath, take a step back. I spent a little bit more time at home as I was adjusting, I am adjusting to this. My blood pressure lets me know when it's too much for me because it'll spike. And learn what my new operating system is for this. There is a way to navigate this. This is new. And as I'm learning how to do that, I'm getting better at it. Not there yet, but I'm working with it. I understand. If you are you're feeling like your heart is jumping, you're having blood pressure spikes, it's very important to see a doctor about it too. You want to make sure that there's nothing else going on. And you feel this. So these are feelings that we have. So we may have heightened senses. As we spend more time in these dimensions, because they're calmer, more peaceful, we can remove ourselves into areas that are more comfortable for us. But we also are learning how to deal with this operating system. So when we're dropped into something that can seem jarring, especially if it's something like waking up to war somewhere, we also have ways that we can deal with that to be able to tamp that down, to not take in all of the emotions around it. So Do what you need to do. It's not necessary to become a hermit and stay home forever. You might need to spend a little bit more time at home during this process. And then as we move through that into the fifth, eighth symptoms, we may experience some unusual physical sensations in our body. Some things that I remember going to sleep one night, waking up in the morning, my knee was killing me. Nothing had happened. But I also had to realize that sometimes that these things that what I'm releasing in my body might release through my joints, might release through different parts of my body. I might feel it more. One of the things that's really good if you have access to an infrared sauna that can help you release a little bit more quickly through your body. If not, just know some salts in a bath. There's different things that you can do physically, but also just breathe into this, meditate, and allow this. It's like a big detox. Allow the release to happen because these profound changes are happening in your body with Ascension. You are literally becoming a light body. Your body's becoming less dense, lighter, more like a crystal, and that can cause pressure. In some of the areas of the bodies might feel a little bit more, like the eyes are a little bit more sensitive to that because they're less dense. So I know for me, I had about a 1.5 year period where I saw lightning at the edges of my eyes. I went in for my physicals. My eyes were fine. But once I started reading about these symptoms, I understood that this was part of my ascension process. So as your vibration increases, the pain's going to diminish. If you're having it, it's going to pass through, and you're going to have really a much higher vibration body. Most important thing to remember about this is where self-care is super important. Number 9, how about feeling like you're crazy? Has anyone felt like that? Because it just feels like the world has gone nuts. Everything's on fire. Like what is going on? This is one of the later signs of ascension, and we might feel like we're losing our grip on reality. People will often during this time check in with a therapist to see if they're developing mental illness. These are because our senses are heightened, our bodies are heightened, our sixth sense is heightened. So all of these things we've been perceiving in a third dimensional world, we're now perceiving through a higher dimension of light. And it can be overwhelming at first. Know that it's okay, that we're having a radical shift in our understanding. I think that the thing that helped me understand it a lot was going back and I watched the trilogy, The Matrix, because that's really what that movie was talking about. It was 2 different realities. The one that was illusion, that was in a more dense world, and then the one that actually was. So know that you're going to find your sense of peace after this adjustment's done. Remember, it's not just about arriving at this destination of a higher dimension. It's about the journey we're living as we get there. It's very important through this process. And this 10th sign has anybody here had their plans drastically change? Things all of a sudden changed. It could have been through illness or divorce, death, whatever it was. You're doing something different with your world than you thought you would. And this is really when we get into that GPS system. We're talking about that GPS, which is God's operating system, right? God. We're talking about that operating system completely changing and moving us into an area that is definitely more in alignment with the higher dimensions. So as we went through this, we've gone through it maybe personally. I know I did when I went through my divorce. That was a big change for me. I don't know if I would have arrived where I am today. I certainly wouldn't have been as happy as I am today if I hadn't gone through that. The world saw it with the pandemic in 2020 and 2021. It changed. Everybody kept waiting for the world to go back to the way it was. That's not happening. That was never going to happen. And how about number 11 for a symptom? You have vivid, intense dreams. Now, I know many of the people that are on this call right now send me their dreams or text me about dreams that they had. And we talk about it. This is a big part of Ascension. So you might experience vivid, wild dreams. Sometimes they might have some violence in them. These are release dreams. This is what's happening. So in our subconscious is finding ways to release. And some of the things we might be releasing might have been from earlier in our life, maybe from previous lifetimes, from habits we picked up, things like that. It's our body adjusting to them and being able to release them. So just know if you're going through a lot of dreams right now, and if they're really uncomfortable, that too will pass, and the dreams will be more peaceful and even beautiful. And also, I see now in my dreams, the thing that has come up for me a lot in the last year or two is that things that I thought I put to rest that were completely done from my childhood or maybe my young adulthood or whatever it was may pop up in a dream or a person might. And I realize that I have some clearing to do with that situation. So it gives me an opportunity to clear that. So know that if your dreams are uncomfortable, it's only temporary. And the last one, I hear a lot about this, people, is you have a longing to go home. Feeling this deep yearning to go home, that we no longer fit here. I hear that a lot. And it doesn't mean that home is a destination, another place. What it means is that we have this deep longing for this ascension to make this change so we feel more at home. Because what's happened is, as we've gone through this process, we may not be feeling so much at home in our bodies. Letting go of the craziness of the third dimension and the ego, we have to let that go. And that helps us to move more into this home. And a lot of us that are here to be on this process, to witness what's happening in the world and be a part of it, and to help the world heal as we move through this ascension. It affects a lot of the community. We're doing this to be in service. And I'll be talking more about that next week. So remember that this process of ascension isn't about losing part of you. It's a journey to discovery to find out where you find your new vibrant self. I think that's amazing. And I'm so glad to be on this journey with you and to be talking about it. And as we move forward on it, we'll be going through these processes. We'll be going through more processes with Ascension. And remember, take time to recalibrate yourself. I always laugh when I see the doctors in. But recalibration during this process is super important. Take time. If we don't just jump from one stage to the next, we take time to understand what our new operating system is. I love for the word guidance with this, especially God, you and I dance. It's time to do that. The Fillmores had some great ways, the co-founders of Unity, great ways to deal with this. Jesus went up to the mountain to pray. It was recalibrating. It was also the lessons he taught us to take that time out, to have that more quiet, to have the quiet. A lot of the other great masters and teachers talk about us being in the quiet. So allow yourself to recalibrate. Don't rush through this. Stay present, because that's the only time there is. Which means it's time to meditate. So why don't we just take a moment and get comfortable? Know that I am open and receptive to the spirit of truth, healing in me what needs to be healed. I'm revealing to me what needs to be revealed. And we look at that with ascension in mind. This is our healing time. This is our time to breathe into this. So I invite you, especially with all the busyness that we have going through this, to place a hand on your heart and a hand on your solar plexus. And when you're feeling like life is too much, when you feel overwhelmed by things, you can breathe in deeply and push that solar plexus out. And then release it. And what you're doing is you're helping to recalibrate. You're helping to bring that balance back to normal. And do that as many times in a row as you need to, or as many times of the day as you need to. So let's just take this moment, and as we breathe in so deeply, we feel our stomachs filling up, and we release. We may have identified symptoms. We may have learned about them for the first time. But it's important now to take this time to remember who and what we are. As we breathe into this, we feel the energy shifting. Maybe in our mind area that's taking all this in and might be thinking, what? Oh my gosh. We're allowing that energy to shift down into our heart area. To be gentle with it, to be gentle with ourselves. As we continue to breathe in, we breathe in knowing that everything is okay. We breathe out, maybe releasing some of the things that we now realize we need to release, but we always do it in a very gentle way. So as we breathe in this light and this love. We breathe out, gently releasing the things that no longer serve us. And just take a few breaths doing this. We breathe in. We feel this energy as above, so below. Energy coming in from the galactic center, the love, the transformative nature. Energy coming up from the earth that is love and transforming. And our light self. Knowing that everything is okay. This is a normal process. And as we gently release any kind of mantras we're holding, we can go into the silence for a few moments. As we start to bring our attention back, we feel the self-love and self-compassion within us, taking care of everything that we need. We feel okay with the changes that are happening, knowing that this is just a normal process to reach these higher levels of transformation and love. What we've released is not losing anything, because where we're going and what we're transforming into is our authentic and vibrant self. And that is a good thing. And as we move into the next part where we take an opportunity to bless those who are holding in prayer, and each and every one of you and those who can't be here. We see perfect health. Cells in our bodies, physical bodies, working in perfect and divine order. Prosperity in every area of your life. Lives filled with peace and joy, that inner joy comes from within and comes from this process. And we understand that this process is love. It can never be anything else. For this, we're deeply grateful. We're deeply grateful for what Jesus, our way shower, came here to teach us, that other guides and masters have and continue to do. We are so grateful. And so it is. Candida will be blessing us with special music.